All right, guys, what's going on? Romer the Romer here. I'm here with my buddy Richard Hill, and today this is a little unorthodox. I know we don't talk about other stuff other than books, but today we're going to get into a little bit about what I've seen Richard do on social media. He's been following me, I've been following him. We graduated high school in 2014, and now it's 2019, and I don't think we've seen each other since.
No, we haven't.
Yeah, but something that's been really interesting about what I've seen on your social media is it almost seems like you're very vocal about your feelings towards police and white people too. And that's been interesting to me because a lot of people are trying to be like politically correct today, and they don't like overstepping their boundaries. And I mean, I could be wrong, and that's why we haven't really talked about it much before this video, but I feel like it's almost more of like a Malcolm X, like harder approach to like change. So if you want to talk a little bit about that,
well, with concerns to, I guess, some of my thoughts on police and even white people, I think it stems, I think, from what needs to be done. Like you said, Malcolm X, not just Malcolm X, but the popular ones are Martin Luther King, and I think peace is a common thing that people spread out. But oftentimes for change, there has to be drastic measures taken. And I don't mean this just in a stance of like black against white. I mean this even on a political level. I think if we want better things, if we want better candidates, if we want people actually trying to enact policy, some things have to be drastic. Some things have to be almost violent in a way. It just has to change. But with concerns to even with society, I think and political correctness, and I think this is a prime topic in this time, considering with Trump in office, and he's not necessarily politically correct, but I just think that sometimes it's needed, because I think Trump is kind of
what's needed, political correctness?
Yeah, well, no, not being politically correct, so, because even with Trump, Trump seems, what he says sometimes is wrong. But let's be honest, how much different is what he says out loud is different than presidents before him that have done the same types of things, that have enacted same types of policies, but what they did is in secretness. They did it in a political manner. They came out and told you what you wanted to hear, gave you hope, did things of this sort, then behind closed doors were enacting policies and things that were exact opposite of what they were saying. So that's where I think sometimes it's political correctness can sometimes be blunt. I mean, not being politically correct can sometimes be blunt and seem like it comes off wrong, but I think it's necessary at times. And I think if you're talking more so in terms of a lot of times I talk about the black struggle, or with black people in society and white people and how this society has started, I think there needs to be a bluntness to it and a realization, because I think because it hasn't been is the reason why we're still having these issues till today.
Okay, let me ask you this. So there's this book I read, it's called 0 to 1, and I actually talk a lot about this book. I've done like 2 free giveaways of it, and it's about how our generation kind of gave up on creating new ideas. Like, we don't really think to create because we have like smartphones, we have all this crazy technology. We kind of think we've reached like the pinnacle of advancement in technology, so a lot of people are they're not really pushing themselves for change. And you could even argue that maybe on like social issues, I haven't really thought about it too much when it applies to that context, but one of the examples that was really interesting to me in the book was he talks about secrets. So the big thing is like there's always going to be secrets, and it's about discovering the secrets and uncovering the secrets and really finding a reason to like work towards that. So one example he gave was in the Bay Area over in California, San Francisco, this one school teacher came up with this whole system on how to like generate more energy from all the waves coming into the bay. And he literally wrote out a plan, and like the government took him seriously, like everyone took him seriously, and this was like in the 50s. And he was talking about how back then just little things like that, like today, who the fuck would trust like a high school teacher to write something out like that? But they actually took him seriously, and they did it. So that's an example of like how ideas were being taken seriously and how like people wanted to advance more. And the reason why I bring this up is the very first example he gave was how it was actually a secret that slavery was bad way back in like early 1700s. Like if we sat down at a dinner table and we were both white and like the political discussion or like the woke discussion would have been, maybe this is bad. You know, like they literally didn't know. Right. Like they it was like debatable. So like the secret was slavery is bad. And now today you ask anyone, even like, you know, people probably that you would consider racist, and they'd be like, oh no, slavery is definitely bad. Like, I'm not saying that. But then they'll say a bunch of other things that are very subtly or even not subtly racist. So I guess my question for you is like, what secrets or what change, you know, would you like to see take place? Because like if I could go back in time, you know, to when slavery was happening, I could sit down at the dinner table. Like I just want to blow my brains out listening to the conversation because it would seem so elementary. It'd be like, well, maybe they're smart enough, or you know, they'd be talking about slaves like maybe they do have more freedom, and it wouldn't. It would just seem like this isn't even like a discussion or debate. Like we can't even talk about like this isn't even real. Today, how does that translate to today? Like what is that secret? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I kind of get what you're saying.
Like 100 years from now, what are we gonna look back at today and be like, wow, that was so silly of us to even allow that.
Right,
you know? and that's a change that needs to take place. So like, what do you think that would be?
I think it comes like I said, we have to like address it with the bluntness and the reality of it. So for instance, in today's time, you look at human trafficking is a big thing that comes up, like where people are disappearing. And or like these are their organizations or these people who are stealing women, children, and they're selling them into human trafficking. So when you look at that, if you talked about human trafficking, it would never be looked at in any sort of a positive light. It's only negativity. It's only a traumatic, scary event like human trafficking. You're actually selling humans. Well, slavery was no different than that. Slavery was the same principle. And not only that, but it wasn't even on a domestic land. It was on another land where it was taken and these people were brought here. So not to like dwell on slavery and things like that, because I think a lot of times the disconnect with the reality and these secrets that would be like, I think for instance, in this time, I think what a lot of people are going to look back and say is it's ridiculous that people were still marching in the streets for situations like a cop killing a black man. It's ridiculous that we're still having conversations about reparations, things of this sort. Reasoning being because I think a couple reasons why we're still in this point. I think one is black people themselves didn't free themselves. So for white people, I think a lot of times it's hard to, it looks like, well, look, we freed you. Lincoln passed the Emancipation Proclamation, we freed you, but you freed us from you. So, I mean, what favor were you doing us? You were doing the right thing. You know what I'm saying? So I think oftentimes that's a reason why it's hard to understand. And now the society we live in,
locking someone in a closet and opening it back up and being like, thank me. Right?
Exactly. Like, thank you for letting me out. No, you did what you were supposed to. You should have never put me in here. And so I think even what we're talking about, like, in this time, I think that's a big reason for the disconnect and the reason why we'll keep having these issues. To advance past them, I think there has to be reasonable justice, and it has to be reasonable solutions to understanding what the effects were of that, because there have been studies of it, there have been effects of it, and I think we got to look at, this is the reason why even with black people we have a lot of our faults, and I think that's another reason. Like for instance, Avery, I've known Avery for a while. I don't think he's racist at all. I would never think he has a racist bone in his body. That's not what black people walk around thinking, or even in this society. It's the fact that you have a privilege that's innate in the fact that you're here on this land. And that's why I think people don't understand. But because America's been built, it's almost like, look at what's been given to us at the same time. You know, America's the land of the free. America has these benefits that many other countries don't. So I think there's a disconnect because mainly, one, we didn't free ourselves. Secondly, because of the building up of America. And I think to advance, I think 100 years from now, to advance, I think we're getting over these moments in parts. I think there just has to be a realization of what's actually going on in society on a systemic level. These things just don't make sense if they're not racist. That's what I've always said. Like for the
okay, so on a systemic level, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, for one, if you look in like with the incarceration rates,
Okay.
Obviously, if you've been in any jail, if you've ever been in jail, if you ask anyone in jail, what are jails and prisons filled up with? Black people and Hispanics, essentially. Although, percentage-wise in population, we're nowhere close to white people. I mean, now the minority population as a whole, when you consider blacks, Hispanics, Asians, we're getting close to being the same as the amount of white people. But when you're looking at them individually, like for instance, we're only 13% of the population. So when you look at these things, but then we're 4 to 6 times more likely to be arrested with drugs. Although drug usage is about the same percentage-wise throughout races, especially between whites and blacks. It's almost the same. So when you look at these things, what's happening for that to occur? You know what I'm saying? So obviously there's a lot of over-policing in a lot of these areas. And a lot of these areas, I will say, have crime. But I've always had this question. If everyone's getting locked up in these areas that's committing the crime, why is that crime still occurring? So that means something's not happening right. And if that's the case, then things have to change. But I think even with that, and even if you look throughout history, even after slavery, the Jim Crow South, that was a whole another period of oppression. And then if you look at things like redlining, even with gerrymandering, with how they cut off districts, that cuts off resources to schools, things of that sort. And these aren't things that are made up. These are things you can research, you can study, you can look, and that they're a fact within society. But I think we have to look at these things for what it is. Like, for another thing that I saw, not to be long-winded on the topic, but
Go for it, man.
not too long ago, my girlfriend was actually doing a study, because she's still in school, on birth rate mortality between just different races. And if I remember correctly, black women are something like 4 times more likely to die during birth than white women. Now, you may ask why that is. You know what I'm saying? Well, oftentimes, and there's been other studies that doctors, nurses, they don't believe minorities when they say something's wrong with them. Oftentimes, you go to the hospital, if you're saying your stomach's hurting or you're having this issue, they have a attitude to not necessarily believe what your pain actually is, or what your situation, or what's actually happening with you. Not only that, but then because of that, it lacks in care oftentimes. And when you look at certain statistics, I mean, I wish I had the study with me, but it was astonishing to me, because I didn't believe it. When my girlfriend told me, I thought she was like, "You're reading this wrong. There's no way this could be the case." But it really is, and it's just things like that. They seem minor, but when you're adding these things up, when mothers are dying more than they have to during birth, when fathers are getting locked up for extended sentences, receiving sentences that aren't fair, things of this sort, this stuff will drastically affect a population, especially one that's a minority population in a society.
Yeah. I'm going to come back at you with the classic, because I have conversations like this with my white friends too. And I mean, like they would probably arguably be racist in a lot of the things they say. But one of the counter arguments I constantly get, and it's not even like I say they would be racist, but it's just like the bluntness. It's almost like pretending that nothing's wrong almost. Right. I don't know but it comes off as like, if it wasn't just me and my friend having the conversation, and like there was a bunch of black people in the room, or like we were on TV or something, it would come off it would be like so blunt, it would almost come off as racist. Right. And the classic counter argument I get is, well, black people commit like, I don't know, percentage wise, 6 times more crimes or whatever. And I know you said this statistic that half the drug use is the same, like among whites and blacks, but blacks are incarcerated like twice as much. What'd you say? Yeah,
I mean, I think I've read a study here necessarily in Tennessee where it can be up to 4 to 6 times as much, where we're more incarcerated. And kind of like referencing with your friends, I don't think also, even I get what you're saying, because I've spoken with white people and they've given me a blunt answer. I don't consider everything racist, because I think a lot of it stems from ignorance. Not saying they're stupid, but it's an ignorance to what your world may be for you. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? As a white person growing up in a society, this society in reality was built for you. Yeah. This was built for white men initially, if you want to be honest.
Let me add on that. I think essentially, like, ignorance, like is racism, and that's, well, ignorance is like the problem with a lot of like groupism in general, because we have racism to deal with as humans, but we also have like sexism, we also have like, you know, religious battles, we have all these different battles, and I think that really is where the issue stems from, is like this groupism. But I was about to say something about the racist, what was I about to say? Had a really good question. What were we just talking about right before that? Right before I went on that little rant.
Talking about with the women and the birth rate, mortality rate being worse, and then you kind of speak to your friends.
Yeah, I was about to say something. Anyway, I'll give it back to you, but it'll come back to me in a second. But yeah, like I guess you were about to answer the question about like the percentage wise and oh yeah, okay. So this is what I was about to say. So the over policing, you mentioned that. So like there's over policing, and I think this has a lot to do with okay. So like when people say black people commit like percentage wise like 6 times more crimes, and I don't even know if that number is true, but I know it's something like that. I know it's like a lot more. My opinion, that's because it's being reported, you know, and it's being reported because it's being over policed, because crimes that happen that don't get reported, obviously we don't know about them, you know. So like a white kid smoking weed, you know, in his parents', you know, basement, that's not going to get reported. But like if you know, it's very hard for, you know, being in the hood when there's like cops all around the corners and your mom's going to kick you out of the house and you got to go around and like, you know, smoke behind like a garage or something. It's much easier to be caught. So how much of this do you think is caused by over policing, and what exactly is the problem with the over policing? Is it the fact that the crimes aren't justified, or is it just the fact that there's over policing? And one more thing I want to add to this is, I guess another counter argument we would get is that police should focus on the most dangerous neighborhoods, and inevitably the most dangerous neighborhoods are going to be predominantly black in like cities. So
yeah, and with the over policing, and when you look at that, and that's why I say many of the black people's issues, a lot of them we have issues within ourselves. We do have to correct ourselves. When you look at the murder rate, the murders that happen in cities like Chicago, Baltimore, oftentimes a lot of that is dealing with black people, and it's black on black crime. Although there's white on white crime, I mean 80% of murders are going to be committed within that same race. If a black person, usually it's going to be 80% of the murders are going to be by another black person. So it's not that it's necessarily unusual, because you're going to commit crimes usually where you're at, but it's a lot of things that stem into what creates crime, and many of it has to do with resources, where you live, population density. There's been studies where just simply if the density of population's higher here, it's going to be a higher level of crime. But what I mean more so with the over policing is that oftentimes we're subject to situations that necessarily wouldn't have happened in another area. And like, I can even give you an example just living in here, and then this is more of an anecdotal, but if you look at, I've lived out here where you kind of stay out now, and this is a nicer area. It's a predominantly, I would say, white area, especially if you go a little deeper into Bellevue. And I've lived near the city. For one thing, the police presence is astonishingly different on a consistent basis. And not only that, but then it's like the aggressiveness. If you go in the city, you can almost watch the police and how aggressive they're policing. We're pulling people over. Someone getting pulled over right now. We need to write a ticket. We need to do this. And what that does is it's going to increase your volume of chances of catching someone. Yeah, you might pull somebody over and they have a little weed in their car. But now this person you pulled over, you searched them, you did all this extra, and then you write them a ticket. So it seems it's like the over policing stems into where it becomes unnecessary policing. You're almost like putting resources. That's why my issue has always been, you got all these police, but how is this crime still occurring? Everybody's not a criminal here. So y'all either not catching all these people that are getting crimes, you're not actually doing your job and catching the right people, or because you're focusing so much on over policing, now people who shouldn't be going to jail really, because these are minor things, non-violent things, they're being harassed, they're being stopped, whether it be for a little marijuana, whether it be a speeding ticket, whether it be these different types of issues that could end up where you end up in jail or just being stopped by the police. And it makes different situations come about. And that's why I think even with the police shootings we've seen, I think with white people, like for instance, my situation, I've been in a few situations with police where I think, well, damn, I might have been shot in that situation. I was pulled over once coming out of Knoxville. Didn't have anything in the car. I was in a rental car. It was a brand new car. Hadn't done anything in the car, anything like that. I was pulled over. He said I had switched lanes quickly. Pulls me over, searches my car, brings dogs, searches my car, everything. They don't find anything, of course. But I was angry. I was angry because I didn't get why I was being pulled over. He told me himself I didn't really break necessarily a law. He thought it was suspicious how I switched the lanes because I went from the fast lane to the slow lane because it was traffic. I was trying to just find a quicker lane. And so those are anecdotals, but I think if you talk to a lot of black people, you get those types of things. Yeah. You understand.
Let me add to that real quick. So I think one of the biggest problems with like racism today, and that's the reason why I see that question, like what secrets do we have to like uncover now, is it's really hard to pinpoint like racism, which makes it almost worse because it's like, what exactly is it? Was that racism or not? When he pulled me over, was he being? I don't know what he was thinking in his head, right. And so here's a story about me and my buddy Fritz. I don't know if you saw me and him. He's from Haiti. He was living with me for a while, but he helped me out with my book business for a while. And we went up to Indiana, and we were getting pizza, and I always do this. Every time I clean out my car, I find a dumpster nearby. So I found a dumpster behind this bar. Actually, it was in front of this bar. And we pull up, and I'm cleaning out my car, and Fritz is with me, and there's this dude that's just looking at us. And he's just staring at us cold. I take out the boxes, I throw them, in the dumpster. I look at him again. I'm like, okay, he's pissed that we're using his dumpster. All right, whatever. So this lady comes out, and she's like, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I explained to her I was wanting to talk. Fritz never said anything. And Fritz is from Haiti. Like, he's super, super dark. And then she went back inside. We became cool because I was like, personable to her or whatever. And she like understood what we were doing. I was like, yeah, we're just throwing out some McDonald's or whatever in the dumpster. So then she comes out again, and she's a little bit more livid this time. And I know that she went back in, and there was some type of conversation that happened. I can't tell you what the conversation was, but obviously a conversation happened because people convinced her to feel a certain way about the situation. Like we were like invading her property. Then the dude pulled out a gun, the dude that was staring at us, and this dude is white, and he starts walking towards us with a gun. I'm like, this is not cool. And so we, all right, we're getting out of here now. And so we start pulling away, and then, as we're pulling out, like the gun's like pointed towards us. It's behind his back, but regardless, it was pointing our direction. And then, exactly how we felt when we went to go get pizza. Like me and Fritz didn't even have to exchange words with each other because like Indiana there's a lot of white people there. And I hated the situation because there was like, we couldn't pinpoint that it was racism. We just couldn't. Like I couldn't like say for sure there was no racist exchange given, but it just, both of us had like this gut feeling. And like I looked Fritz in the eyes, and like he's from Haiti, so like he grew up not even being around white people. Right. Because that country is like almost all black. There's actually a really cool story about that country. Like the black people all got together, and this one white dude came back from France, brought a ship of guns, and like gave it all to the black people, and they like did a rebellion and like killed all the French people, and all the rest fled. So like now, that's why Haiti's like all black, because they scared all the white people away. So it's like America if like the black people scared all the British people back to Great Britain, but we couldn't pinpoint it, and that's when I was like, I can't even go out and like talk about this on social media. I don't even feel good about it, because what if in an ideal world, if I had like a time machine, I could go back and bring my white friend Keith with me, and we could go there again. If the situation unfolded the same exact way, then okay, I couldn't say it was racist. Maybe they're just dicks, and I feel like that's really where the issue is now, or that's one of the issues, is we can't pinpoint where the racism, what is racist and what's not. And because it's so subtle, you don't know what's going on in someone's head. So like the real issue, like racism's still the real issue, but like it's not like it was before, where it's like, hangings are occurring and all that. It's much more subtle now, where like a cop pulls you over and he's got every reason to write you a ticket, but it's a result of over policing, or it's a result of, you know, him like profiling. Like there's all these little things, and it's, you just can't pinpoint it. So like, I don't know if you've thought about like solutions to this, or like the root psychological problems, and like that's why I'm attracted to your content, because I think a lot of people would look at like what Richard posts on social media, and they would be like, wow, like Richard's an ass. Because like he was downtown, and you're kind of making fun of this white dude, and he was like, I don't know, he was just drunk, and I don't even know what he said to you guys, but like he was just being silly. And then Richard says something like, go back to your people, or something like that. And like people would look at that and they'd be like, wow, you know, Richard's, you know, he's being way too aggressive. Like why is he like, you know, they'd say you're being racist, you know, like a lot of people would. But if you look at the root problem as being psychological, and it is that it's ignorance, it's psychological ignorance, you know, very deep rooted, and that's it, but now it's, like I keep saying, it's more subtle. In order to shift that back out of ignorance, sometimes it requires a little bit of muscle, and I think that's how you're approaching it, and that's what I'm getting, at least. What do you think the solution is to, like, because I mean we can stop over policing, we could put policies in place for that, but as far as the psychological issue goes, this is something much more complex, and the way to approach it has to be more complex because of that. So what's your solution to like shifting this ignorance back? Is it, you know, being more aggressive, or is it taking the Gandhi approach?
Yeah, I think it just, like I said, you kind of mentioned with the Malcolm X approach. Now, there has to be a reasonableness behind anything you do. You have to do things in order. But I think a lot of times people, we lose track of, to be honest, there hasn't been a long time since America's kind of shifted its paradigm. And what I mean by that is, like I said, with slavery, then it goes into, you're going to get into the Jim Crow South. And then around the 50s, 60s, you get integration, you get things of these sorts. So it feels like a big shift in switch and progression. And what that did is, like you said, it made racism in a lot of ways a lot more subtle. So that's why I be a lot of times on the fence, even about, oftentimes now that you see even in politics with Kamala Harris, you look at a lot of these candidates, first thing when Trump tweets something is, that's racist, you know? And a part of me is like, I want everything that's racist to be called out. Yeah. Another part of me thinks sometimes what it does is it waters it down. And what it does is it's just going to put it more in a reclusive state, and things are just going to get more behind the scenes on us.
It's like the boy who cried wolf.
Right.
Almost.
And so I think to shift, to advance, like I said, it starts with the bluntness. I think it hasn't been a long time for, I feel like, black people to get more of an unhindered chance to progress. If you look at it in reality, after the 50s, 60s, 60 years down the line, we got our first black president. Now, I know it's a hip hip hooray, but we're getting steps. You're seeing more black people. You're seeing more just colored minority individuals in different positions of power becoming judges. I think over time, society will kind of readjust itself. But I think there does have to be a need for actual action, and I mean in a legal standpoint. If you look at like the LGBTQ community, for instance, the reason why they're getting such large steps so quickly is because they're taking it straight to the courts. We're not going to just march.
They're also being very aggressive.
Very aggressive. Yeah. Very aggressive. And no one's holding it against them. You know what I mean? They get it's okay for them to get all their rights. They can yell, they can scream, they can be aggressive, they can be online, they can do all these things. But and that's the reason why they're making such leaps, because it's going to take that. Because if you look at the establishment of America, it's not meant for everybody, as people oftentimes like to think. Not in its natural state. And a lot of that, like I said, stems from how it was built, and I think from capitalism. I think capitalism is a large part of it, and I think people overlook that. Mm-hmm. With capitalism, there's going to be inequality. There has to be. There has to be somebody working at the bottom level. If we're making all this money, everybody's not going to be Jeff Bezos. Everybody's not going to be Mark Zuckerberg. There's going to have to be somebody working. There's going to have to be somebody doing the dirty work. So it's going to be a level of inequality anyway, because at the bottom you're going to be paid whatever the minimum is or whatever we're offering you, because we can get anybody to come do this job. We can get anybody to come here and put something on a conveyor belt. So there's going to be a level of inequality on anything, and it's going to be a larger level of separation, I think, even with school, because it's going to be the have and have nots. That's why I like the concept of school, people wanting free education, things of this sort, which may seem extreme and even socialist. I know a lot of people don't like the concepts of free this, free that, because nothing's free. But nothing's free more so because we're in a capitalist society. That's what people forget. Because if you're in a capitalist society, there's going to be the have and have not. It's going to be people that are going to be able to go to school, and then there's others not going to have that same opportunity because they just simply don't have the funds. They don't have the backing. And I think to advance, I think throughout society, we're seeing it naturally happen. But there's going to be pullback because I've always said at the top levels, you don't think they understand this. You don't think Trump and them understand that within 50, 60 years, America's not going to look the same. It's not going to be as white as you thought it was because there's a lot of Mexicans here. That's why these immigration things are starting to become in the talk, because it's relevant. In 50 years from now, do you want everybody looking like somebody mixed? You know what I mean? Do you want somebody, because that's what it's going to look. It's going to be lighter, mixed skin, a lot of mixed race people. There's going to be a lot more colored people in general. Yeah. And so I think these things are going to help mold society more into an inclusive society for all, but it just takes time.
So that last point is super interesting, because I actually always present that as a solution. I'm like, eventually, maybe not like 100%, but a lot of us are going to look much more similar in the future because we're all going to mix. Now, I'm not going to put this girl on blast, but I dated this girl where I never met her dad because I was white, and he had a good philosophy, and it's not just her. Like I've heard other black men have this philosophy. I think it's a Black Panther philosophy, but it's the idea that blacks should only date within their community because there's something called brain drain that happens. Like Haiti is a great example. My roommate Fritz, very smart guy. He's probably gonna live in America the rest of his life. Very smart guy from Haiti. Boom, he gets smart enough to come to America and get an education. Haiti wanted him to come back, but something fell through with the rules, so now he can come to America. So the best Haitian is now leaving. Like the best of the country leaves, which is obviously bad for the country. That's what happens in the hood too. People leave the hood because they become successful. They don't want to go back. That's the argument with the date within your community, because what happens is, a successful black woman starts dating a white dude, and then she leaves. She goes and lives in Brentwood, Tennessee for the rest of her life, and never goes back to North Nashville. Right. This is my opinion. I'm answering my own question here. But my opinion is the kid's going to come out looking, more like you than me in most situations, even like with Hispanics. And I think that's a good solution. I see where like the thought process comes from, and I see why people want to date within their community, because keep the best of the community with each other and then give back to the community. But do you think that's an issue? And like, if so, if not, like, what is a good solution to like help the black community or help these communities in poverty?
I think when it comes to like, reproduction and who you choose with, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Who you decide to have babies with. I think that it's necessary. Like, I think everyone in a way naturally kind of wants to reproduce with their people, and there's a strength in that. There's no denying it. And reasoning being is, when you produce with your own people, you keep your culture, you keep everything you're taught. Mm-hmm. None of these things change. Things are passed down throughout generations. Not only that, but you're more likely to be putting your money back into your own people. That's one of the big issues with black people too. We don't spend our money with ourselves. All our money goes to most likely white people in a lot of instances. Yeah. That's not the same with Jewish people. That's not the same with Jewish community. It's not the same with a lot of these Hispanic communities. They spend a lot of money within their communities. You can go in Nashville and Nolensville Road. You look at all these Mexican restaurants. What do you think they're doing throughout the day? They're spending money at these Mexican supermarkets and all these places where they're keeping their money within their people. That does build strength. It builds unity. and it's a necessity. I think more so in small minority groups. Now, I've never been one to be too mad about someone being with someone outside the race. I think with black people, it comes up a lot because we see sports players, and it seems like they always with a white woman. Like, they get big, you finally get your $50 million check for shooting a basketball, and you go get a white woman. You look at Michael Jordan, you look at, there's a lot of prominent figures we know. Now, not all of them, but it's just, I don't think it's a huge issue either, because I think naturally people are gonna more likely than not be with who they look like. I think there's natural division. I think that's another thing that people should understand. There's no issue with me being black and you being white. There's no problem with saying we're different in that way. There's no problem with even saying I want to reproduce with your own people. I get the concept. And a lot of like Malcolm X, a lot of these people, like, they were big on that you should do that because it's gonna help us. You don't need to benefit by mixing your dreams with other people. But I don't have much of an issue with it, and I think naturally, like I said, people are gonna usually reproduce with their own. But I think there is a necessity to it because, like you said, with the guy from Haiti, if he's like number one out the country, you take him out that country and he goes to America and gives all his talents and his abilities and what he can produce and provide to society. Now he's giving it to America. He's not giving it to his people, not people that look like him, not people that help them. And Haiti could use it a lot more than America. Yeah. But I think that's a part of it. I think even with black people, but I think it's more important to change the culture and change our mindsets on a lot of things. And it won't be as pertinent to, well, we got to have our children with our race and even white people. Because I've been on both sides of the fence. I know, and that's why I never have an issue with, like, if I was to bring home a white girl, my parents would look at me left. They'd be like, really? Like, this what you doing? Like, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Not that they would get mad at me or anything, but they gonna be like, what's up with this? You on some Oreo stuff now?
I think it's almost worse the other way around because, like, I guess it's almost because, like, the dominance of men in our society. But when a white man comes in and takes a black girl, it's like, oh, like, after everything I learned about history, now one of them's coming and taking you. So, like, I kind of get it. Yeah. But it's also insulting the flip side because, like you said, like, the top of the top black, successful people, they almost always choose white women. So it's like insulting to the black women because it's like, exactly. Oh, wait, this is the best. This is like the cream of the crop.
Like, it's like you get there and then that's the trophy. Like, you're like, I gotta be a white woman. But, I think, people, like I said, you gotta look at it. If you're partying in Beverly Hills every day and you got a house in Calabasas and you're rich, well, I mean, to be honest, you're going to be around a lot more white women at that point. Yeah, so I think that goes into it a lot of times with those people. But I think that naturally, like I said, it's just going to all work out for the most part because white people are going to reproduce with white people. But I think, like I said, this is the reason why a lot of this immigration stuff has been coming into talks lately. That's why so many people want to point out Trump and call him out on some of the things he says because it's almost like a dog whistle. Like, you're playing us like we're ignorant. We get what you're saying. You know what I mean? You can't have all these Mexicans coming in because you keep having them come in here. They're reproducing at a lot higher rate than white people are. We reproduce at a higher rate than white people do. You know what I'm saying? White people actually are, that's part of the issue. They're not reproducing. And even in a millennial society, people are having less babies. But it's like in a time where you got all these people coming over the border, you got a lot more, colored individuals from all over the world coming into the country and being here, it seems like a more necessity for people to breed within their own. But, I never have an issue with people wanting to do right or do good for their people. I think it's backwards if you don't. You know what I'm saying? I don't blame a white man for wanting his daughter necessarily to be with a white man because that makes sense. It makes sense to me. It makes sense. You want her to maintain your culture, maintain what she's been taught, maintain what you all do. I mean, I come from a different culture, if I'm black. Not that I can't have the same experiences or we can't love each other or there can't be a bond in that way, but it is going to be different. And through just automatically, it's kind of like if you're a Christian, you marry a Muslim. Like, automatically that child's going to have both. Now, you know what I'm saying? If you're a strict Christian, you may not want that, so you need to marry another Christian. So it's just things on that tip. Like, I think
it seems like it's almost more cultural with you, like the issues you're talking about.
Well, yeah, I think that's what it gets down to at the end of the day. It's not just necessarily that they're black. I mean, unless you're racist, then you say, or even vice versa. Unless you're just against white people, it's more so the fact that what are you going to be losing by them reproducing together? What are you going to be giving up? Because there are some people that get in relationships and they'll convert to what their husband or wife is, or there might be different things that y'all do raising the child that might be completely different. And it's even with the awareness. I have cousins that I have Filipino, and they're black, but they're not. You know what I mean? I'm black. I'm more black than them, I would say, and not because I'm darker or anything, but because they get darker during the winter. I mean, during the summer, but they have like the straight hair. But I think, identify. They were around more white people. You know what I'm saying? Not that it's an issue, but it's just it almost seems like sometimes they don't realize they're black. You're a darker skinned person still. You're still a melanated person. So you're still on this side of the fence. And so I think it makes a disconnect. And I've heard even like mixed people say that, light skinned black people say that, they say they're not accepted maybe one way or the other because of those things. But I just think on a cultural level, that's what it gets down to, because that's what's going to end up being dispersed to the child at the end of the day. What are you being taught? What is being brought into this situation by bringing in two people from different cultures?
So that's interesting you say that, because my buddy Fritz from Haiti, he says in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, those two countries are right next to each other. He says all the light-skinned people think they're way better than the dark people down there. And he says if you come to America, you're all black. If you go to Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, or wherever, and you go to the KFC, like you're being treated the exact same. Which leads to my next question. What's the most racist thing you have experienced?
Let's see. I've had some general like situations where
bring out the spice rum.
Yeah, we bring out the spice rum for this one. We're gonna talk about y'all racist motherfuckers out here. Nah, but I would say I think
need a cup? In
all honesty, no, you can just kind of pour it in there. I think in all honesty, the most racist thing that I've dealt with is my interactions with police, and that's why I be saying to people that they don't understand is every time I've had an interaction with the police, I'm gonna be honest, I think there may have been maybe 4 or 5 times in my life I've either gotten pulled over or had an interaction with the police. Every single time I think they searched me or tried to search me. You get what I'm saying? It's like an aggression that I just know you wouldn't have if I looked different. Like if I looked different, if I had a suit and tie and maybe I was white, you wouldn't have treated me this way. So you're not gonna pull over this businessman and do him the same way you would do me. Yeah. Just for the principle that I'm young, I'm black, I might have had my hair out like in a fro or something at that time. So I think that's probably the most racist thing that it's just my general interaction with police is usually they're in an aggressive manner towards me, I feel like. Yeah. Now, I've sometimes been mad. I'm going to be honest. I remember one time I was stopped at Watkins Park, right across from the school. Me, Eli, and Mike, one time. And it just seemed like they wanted to take us to jail. We didn't end up going to jail. We didn't even get a ticket. But it was just like, this was an hour-long fiasco of y'all trying to search us, bringing dogs, questioning for us to just go home that night. And it's just like it's the aggression sometimes that I think. But I would say in all reality, I haven't experienced much racism from, I would say, individuals that are white. We went to the same school. I think our school was relatively diverse. Mm-hmm. And even when I was younger, I was mostly around black people. So I think that I don't know if I can recall a blatant racist situation that I can recall for myself. I think I've gotten the purse clutch and things of that sort when you walk past it, but that to me doesn't bother me. I don't consider that even racist sometimes. If you're older, I've heard of I have a grandfather that's been robbed by teenagers. You know what I'm saying? They were probably black and he's black. You know what I'm saying? So you might just clutch your purse because teenagers might looking for you if you're an older woman. Yeah. I don't think of everything. I don't take it that personally as racist, but I've never really been called nigger or nothing like that to my face or nothing. I don't recall nothing like that, but my interaction with police is probably the worst. I just never, I've had maybe, I've been pulled over and warned before, like for a seatbelt, but it just always seems like they want to, let's see what you got going on. Because it's like, if you're pulling me over for a speed ticket, then write me my ticket and go about the day. But it's like when you want to pull me out the car, I just think this is a standard oftentimes for young black males we have to deal with. Because I've spoken to a lot of the other ones and they understand what I'm saying. It's just different. They come to the car, it's different. We don't want to hear nothing. Listen to me. And it's almost like a superiority thing. You're already a white man. You already got your badge. And now it's like, do what I say. Get out the car. Put your hand in. It's like, for what? Like, I'm not doing nothing. Now it's like, it causes issues. So, but like I said, I don't think I've had anything with individuals.
Yeah, I've been pulled over a lot, way too many times. I get several tickets a year. But there's been 2 times I can recall. I think there's 3 actually. I just can't think of the third one right now. But where I've been pulled over and I had my black friend in the back. And one time they didn't even, like, they knocked on his window. Not mine.
It's like, hey.
I was like, wait. I was driving on the wrong side of the road. Now you're knocking on his window, because she literally was like searching him for weed. I mean, he was like shuffling around and stuff, but he's also black. I mean, it's one of those situations where you can't pinpoint it. I can't say, oh, that was racist. Exactly. And another time, it was nighttime too, but this guy was really dark, and he was dancing in the back, and she addressed him again. So, but there's also times where, like, I got my whole car searched one time, headed down. And I hate cops whenever I get a ticket. Like, that's my philosophy. Like, I like cops when they help. Like, and
right.
I know,
like serving and protecting. Like, I feel like the point of a ticket, if you have to, you got to do what you got to do. But
yeah,
I think it shouldn't be just because, like, oh, you didn't use your signal, like, I'm gonna ticket you, like, I'm gonna make this a thing now. It's just, if you're serving and protecting, I've seen cops stop.
Well, I'm even talking about, like, the situation, like, where my cousin, I thought he died on Percy Priest Lake, and I called the police, and it was very nice to have instantly a team of people helping out. Right. So, like, I love him in that situation. But, like, I was driving down from Kentucky to Tennessee, and I was, like, being really sketchy, and plus I get really, like, egotistical and, like, rude around cops sometimes. And he searched my whole car, like, top to bottom, like, took out all my camping gear. He thought I was, like, slinging coke or something. Like, because he would ask me questions and I would think about them. He'd be like, do you have drugs in the car? I'd be like,
no, I don't think so. Yeah, that's gonna get them to search you for sure.
Yeah. I think if you could, live through my eyes, like come in my body and literally, go to my family events and hang out with the friends I hang out with, you learn a lot just on the things they say. And I'm sure I could learn from you too, but I think you could learn a lot more from me, because then I think you'd get an idea of, like, what's really going on, like, and where these issues really stem from, like the overall attitude, because no one likes to think they're racist today. Right. It's not cool to be racist anymore. There's probably some places where it's still cool to be racist. Like, there's probably some areas, but generally, like Nashville, these bigger cities, right, it's not hip to be racist anymore. And like, one of my family members, I'm not going to put them on blast, but I mean, they're much older, and they said something along the lines of, like, and they really don't they don't consider themselves racist, but they said something along the lines of, I just don't understand why black people have to do what they do. And I was like, that's the issue right there. Like, lack of empathy is really, like, right, like what I'm seeing, and just that overall attitude of, like, thinking it's like a choice, of like the poverty, and like she even said, like, the way they talk, right, like, I don't get that. And I was just like, it just made me cringe, man. I'm just like, but right, she would never consider herself racist, and
she probably in real reality, they probably aren't. It's not, because racism to me, real racism is, you think you're superior to me because of your race. You think you have power. You think you're supposed to have power over me, that you're supposed to be able to have opportunities that I'm not supposed to have, things like that, simply because of your race. To me, that's what real racism is, and that you can enact issues. That's why a lot of people say, like, black people can't be racist, which, I mean, I get what people say when they say that. They say it because we don't have the ability to enact any real, like, me calling you a cracker, for instance, it might offend you, but what power does it really have over you?
I don't
As opposed to the vice
I've
versa.
thought about that one a lot.
Yeah, it's like it's like me calling you ugly or something. Like it might be an insult, but it has no historical power over you. Yeah. It has no actual systemic power over you. I can't do anything.
It's like saying your mom to someone whose mom died versus saying your mom to someone whose mom is still alive.
Right. And it's just a difference.
It has a much different weight.
But I think there is a lack of understanding. You know, I think because even for myself, I be thinking, you know, I've had white friends too. I considered you a white friend growing up, but it's just like I don't think I've ever had a lot of white friends where I can actually understand how they came up, their understanding, and vice versa. I don't think it's the same with white people. So that's why you might say, like, why do they talk like that? Why they talking this way? Because you just don't understand it. Like, why can't they just talk like us? You know what I mean? Why can't they do it this way? Or I don't understand why they act the way to do the things they do, but people are different, you know? I don't understand why, you know, other races might do this or why it's even important to them, but that's not for me to judge or have, to be honest, an opinion on. You know what I'm saying? If you believe in what you believe, you do what you do, that's fine. If I do what I do, it's fine. But I think, like the ignorance to like understanding what, like empathy, people understand what people go through, things of that sort. Because I've grown up, and I grew up, I guess you could call it somewhat the hood, North Nashville. I was right down the street from Joe Johnson my whole life. And you know, I've seen things, but I've had a lot of friends. I wasn't rich. My parents weren't rich, but I be thinking I was in a better situation than a lot of the people I grew up with. I had both my mother and father. If you talk to a lot of black people, they didn't know their fathers. I knew my father day one. I mean, I always knew my father. It was nothing to a thing about it. I knew my father. I knew my mother. My parents are good, moral, principled people. You know what I mean? You know, they didn't smoke around me. They didn't even curse around me, any of those sorts of things. And I know friends that grew up in all types of homes, situations. Fathers weren't around, were broke, couldn't change their shoes, didn't have different clothes to wear, and those things, especially as a child, are gonna affect you. You know what I'm saying? It's like children cry over iPads, and like imagine if you didn't have shoes to wear to school, and you knew people might pick on you or would pick on you, or you know, and things like that, and a lot of people are in those situations. So I think it's a lack of understanding, like, you know, everybody don't come from the same thing, you know, and I don't even white people, everybody don't come, every white person didn't have a great life. I know that. They didn't come up with a great life, had both parents, any of that. A lot of white people had situations they had to go through. But I think people just have to have empathy and understanding and really try and get to know someone that's different from you. Unless you really know, if you're going off of a hypothesis of what you heard, you don't know. You're ignorant. You're saying something that you feel, but it may not be the case. And I think that's the positive about the millennials generation. I think our generation is more accepting, you know. And I don't agree with everything myself personally, but I think we're more accepting and understanding of differences and giving just respect to it. You know what I'm saying? I might not agree with something you do, but if it's not affecting me, I shouldn't do anything to affect you because of it.
One of the problems I have with the millennials being more accepting, especially like the white millennials, is like actions are relative. So like being a thief, you can steal from someone, and it's relative to how hard that is. Okay, are you stealing from someone when they're not home? You know they're not home. You know your friend told you that they screwed them over. So now you kind of have like a justified reason to steal from them. It makes it much easier to like, you know, do the act. You're like, oh, I'm not going to get caught, and they screwed my friend over, so it's very easy for you to steal from that person. Right. When it comes to when it comes to being racist, it's much easier to be racist if, you know, you grew up in, I don't know if Montana's a racist state, but like a KKK, you know, little community, it's much easier to be racist. I think for the millennials, it's much easier, especially like in these cities, it's much easier to say woke things and be on black people's side now, with practically zero backlash, and you almost get more support from white people and black people. So it's not even like
it's like almost beneficial for
you can't even call that courageous anymore, because it's so easy. There's no resistance behind it. I'm not saying they shouldn't do it, but I'm not really impressed by it now. Now go back 200 years and say the same things that you're saying now that are woke, and that takes a lot of courage, because you're likely to, even as a white person, die. And what was I getting at? There's just... Martin Luther King said this. He said that he wasn't mad at the overt racist white person. He wasn't mad at the person that, said the N-word and did all that, had very strong opinions. He actually respected that person more than the white moderate. And the moderate was the one that, stayed in their house. They didn't really go marching. They knew it was bad. They knew it was bad on, they had a gut feeling. They knew in their soul that it was bad, but they took no action because their wife would judge them, their grandma, their kids. And it was much easier to be like, well, fingers crossed, I hope this change happens, but I'm not getting involved with it because it's too much for me. I don't want to be an outcast in my community because of these things I say. And the things that they would say back then are the things that we say now and we take as facts. They're no longer secrets, So I don't know if there's much courageous things to be said anymore by white people when it comes to racial change, social racial change. But I mean, I've asked this question to you before, but I guess I just keep asking it in different ways, and I'm trying to get down to this myself. I've been thinking a lot about it, but what is the action that really needs to take place? What is it to actually make this shift in consciousness and away from ignorance, away from that member of my family who's saying I just don't understand the way they do. What's the course of action?
I just think I think politics is a big part, and what I mean by that is, and I think it's starting to be seen, is for instance, even with Trump, you were talking about overt racism. I think that's why I've talked to black people and white people about Trump, and there's a host of black people. Oh, there's a host of black people that, of course, they're like, Trump's racist. I never, but there's a host of us, and I'm kind of on that tip. I take Trump over a Bill Clinton. I would, personally. Why? Trump says what he feels, and it may not be right. It may not be cool, but I know how you feel. Mm-hmm. Bill Clinton was on Arsenio Hall show. He's with black people. I've seen him in pictures with Jay-Z. You know what I mean? It looks nice, but then you're enacting these bills behind the wall, and then you were talking about even with the white moderate, and I think that it's worse for someone that's on the fence and or who knows is wrong, and it's just you're not doing anything. You're not gonna actually help or even say anything about it. And to be honest, in certain situations, you'll be on the wrong side, knowing it's the wrong side, just because it's safer, just because it's easier to do, and But I think it starts from the top down, in all honesty, and I think that's where we're starting to see the shift in paradigm. Now, I like politics, but a lot of my issues with politics and even people's thinking is, for one thing, is this party loyalty, and I think what is happening in America is you kind of have the Democrats and the Republicans, and really what it's a fight over is power between those parties. It's not necessarily about the people so much, so it's more about the fight against the power. And why I say that is, if we were talking about immigration, for instance, and Trump is not, I don't agree with what's happening, a lot of the stuff at the border, but a lot of people don't know that Obama was sued by the ACLU for the conditions of those camps that these immigrants were going into, for the same type of issues, hygiene and things of this sort. But there were no Democrats in the outward at that point in time. So what this makes me question is, are you more mad about that, or is it because of what's happened now, because of the agenda that's in place? And to me, it's the latter, because now Trump's in office, we're going to use this against him. Now we're mad. Now this is the worst thing ever, because we need you out of office. And I think America as a whole, the people have to demand the power back from these politicians. And I think once that happens, you'll see a bigger advance in society. Because I think on a day-to-day basis, like I said, white people aren't racist on a day-to-day basis. I don't think white people walk around calling people niggers, that they hate black people, anything of that sort. I don't think it's anything of that sort at all. I think a large majority of them actually aren't. It's just, for them, there's no relativeness to it. There's no reason for me to do anything. because I didn't do anything to you. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to work today. I don't have to help you out of the bottom. But I think if it's spent down from the top, society will naturally correct itself because people's minds are different now than I think they were at a point in time. So I think it kind of starts top down. I think we have to have a political revolution. I think people need to stop having this stupid political party loyalty. Like black people, we always vote Democrat. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. And they say insanity is if you keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Hey, that's a definition of insanity. So if we've been voting for Democrats for 50, 60 years and we're not happy with our conditions, why would you continue doing that? Not saying you should necessarily go vote Republican, but I'm saying why would you continuously do the same thing and you're not getting a different result? You're not getting a result you would like. It's time to switch up things. And not just for black people, even with white people. If we're not happy with the people that's being presented to us, we have to do something different. I think too often we get two candidates presented to us, one Democratic, one Republican, that's your only choice. So how much freedom are you really having? If every year that's what it could come down to, and 90% of the people in America are going to go vote for one of those two people. So you don't have much of a choice if that's the case. So I think we have to demand more from the top down. Once we do, I think society will, in a lot of these situations, naturally correct itself. I think we understand it's a different point in time in society, and people's minds are different, and it would just happen.
So what's your opinion on Kanye West and what he's doing with Trump and,
Man, and it's funny because I'm a Kanye fan, or I was more so. Yeah, in high school, I was crazy over Kanye. I thought he was like the GOAT, man. But Kanye, I think sometimes says things and then interpret it in the wrong way because of how he says them. I don't necessarily agree with him because, I think he was used as a prop, and I think people can see right through that. Why are we inviting Kanye West into the Oval Office and talk to the president? It doesn't make sense. What president, don't invite a rapper, singer, into the Oval Office on national TV to do that. It's a prop, because people like black, Kanye West and stuff. But even some of his comments with slavery, I just think, he got a lot of stuff going on sometimes. So my support from him wavers from time to time. But I think he doesn't know how to explain himself. Like, even for instance, the comment he made with the slaves, and that if you're in slavery for 400 years, that's a choice.
If you're enslaved, what?
He said if you're in slavery for 400 years, then that's a choice. And I thought that was an ignorant comment, but if you break it down what he's saying, for instance, there was a time where there were more slaves in America than there were white people. There were 4 times as many slaves as white people at a point in time in America in history. That's how many white they were bringing over, because they only had the colonies in it originally. Gotcha. But you're bringing in loads of slaves. All these. So imagine if they just all decided, let's upward. We could easily take them out.
That's why
exactly.
Haiti's like an example of if America would have done that.
Exactly. But see, people forget that a lot of those Africans were taken from different parts of West Africa, a lot of different dialects. Not all of them could speak the same language, so it wasn't the same connectivity as a country like Haiti, where all of us are Haitian. So let's decide to do this.
Even there, that's why Creole exists, and because it just mixed,
right,
with the French, and there's different dialects of even Creole because the different parts of Africa that mix with the French.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think so when he says that, I think what he's saying is, why didn't they all uproar? And I get it. I get what he's saying, but there's an ignorance to it, because for one thing, when you're in bondage for that long, another thing, there's a mental bondage.
Yeah.
So you gotta realize there were slaves that were born slaves and died slaves.
Yeah.
They never even understood the concept of being a free man doing what you wanted to do, because from the day you were born, you were a slave. So that's a different type of bondage. That's why I be saying, even as comparatively to the Holocaust, not to compare struggles and things like that, but Jews weren't in bondage their whole life, or those Jewish people weren't in bondage their whole lives. You went through this situation for a decade and a half, and it was traumatic, but then you can bounce back from that, because you're not a slave. There comes a point where there are people that, like I said, in slavery here, that they didn't know anything else but slavery. They thought life was slavery.
It's like they were almost brainwashed, because I think about this fantasy a lot. If I actually had the chance to go back to like slavery times, like all the crazy shit I would do, and like how I would approach it. Like would I go by night and like kill like white slave owners? But I thought about it, and it would actually be very difficult to convince the black people to leave.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they'd be like, no, master treats us well. Like why would we do? They'd be looking at me like I was crazy, and then I'd be like, oh shit, like. Not only are they slaves, they're brainwashed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it wouldn't be as simple as in like, come on, let's go, and be like, oh, like even if I could go back in time with like a helicopter or like a plane or something, like some crazy technology, I mean, that'd probably even scare them more. They'd be like, what the fuck is this dude doing? Like,
it's another white man.
Yeah. But it's like this, like they would. I've read The Glory Field. I've read that book a couple times. I think we had to read that at MLK. But it's like. There's slaves that would like justify it. So it's like, how does that translate to today? Like, what are we justifying, like white or black or maybe not even like racist issues? Like what, like I'm super curious to know, like, what are we going to look at like maybe even like 400 years in the future? Cause I'm looking around and I like, whenever everyone's like on board with one idea, I like to, take a step back and say, is that really true? You know what I mean? And like I want to know like what we're missing, and especially like because what a lot of white people say today is like there's a lot of white people that just say they don't think racism exists, and I think Lil Wayne made this worse because Lil Wayne said he never experienced racism before,
and a lot of black people probably haven't.
Yeah,
and you'd be surprised. Like it's not that we go out and call a nigga all the time. It's like. I think, especially if you look at him, and I think that's like you got to look at the situation because I've saw when he said that.
Yeah.
But if you look at Lil Wayne, he was 14, 15 years old when he basically entered the music industry under the wing of Birdman. So, he's on tour. He's doing things. When you're going to your shows and you see a bunch of white people yelling your name, I don't know what racism is. What are you talking about? White people buy my shit. Yeah. You get what I'm saying? So for you, you're not gonna experience that. But I think. For a lot of people, there is that disconnect, and you'll even see black people say that. What are you all talking about? And I think that's because you're not looking at it from the broader. I think in this day and time, it's more of the systemic level we got to look at, and why are there these disparities? Yeah. Because this is what I've always said. If we're locked up way more, what you have to prove to me is, what you're gonna have to say to me, is that we're just more prone to criminality. We commit crimes that it's built in us that we commit more crimes just because that's what we do because we're black or because they're Hispanic. And there's no study to justify that being the premise. Now there's studies to justify that in more poverty-ridden situations there's more crime between whites, blacks, anyone. In more dense populations there's more crime. There's studies to suggest these things, but that's why I think it stems more so at a systemic level rather than a day-to-day. Like Lil Wayne, of course, is not gonna. I think Kanye, that's why it's a disconnect. You're with Kim Kardashian living in the richest part of America. You've been rich for half your life now. You know what I mean? So it's gonna be a disconnect, and for a lot of these people.
Yeah. And I don't even know if I like completely disagree with like Kanye's actions. Like I definitely disagree with like what he said, a lot of what he said, but like the fact that what he's done is, causing conversations like this to happen right now. Yeah. What if he just thought, and that's kind of what like got me into, your stories and your content. You're a little bit more aggressive with it, and he's a provocateur. Like he just says some crazy shit sometimes. He's been known to do that in the past. Like not even just with this stuff. But it's like, if that's what it takes to get conversations and get people's wheels turning, then maybe so be it,
But it's like, and that's why I be saying with him, he's not always wrong. Like, you know what I mean? Like when Taylor Swift won the award and he got up there and he said Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time. He wasn't lying. I mean, that year, I can't remember what song it was, but it was an amazing video. And then Taylor Swift wins it over. So he's not wrong. He's telling the truth, but it's like, you're not right either because you're up there. It's not her fault she won.
Didn't J. Cole like call out who was gonna win the Grammys one year?
And because these institutions, you gotta know that's what I mean, it's gonna be tough for certain people to win certain things. Even Beyonce, of her talent, and not knocking Taylor. Taylor has good stuff. I know she's done her thing and she's had a long career. She's from here, so I fuck with Taylor Swift. But it's just like stuff like that. He's not always wrong, but it's just you gotta. he's not right for how he did it. And like you said, I it's not everything he does is wrong, because I think he has sometimes a method behind the madness. We're having a conversation about it, but you gotta. I just don't like. I feel like black people oftentimes, because of how we've come up, we're in situations that others, you never see that. You know what I'm saying? You'd almost never see some white artists up there like almost pandering. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like only black people get put in that situation. And that's what I hate the most, is like we're so often in a situation where we're like almost used as a prop, or other blacks will slander another black. Like, you know what I mean? And I just don't see those same things. Like, I've seen people denounce Bill Cosby, but I don't see those same things with white people. They don't seem to do their people like that. I think with black people, because there's this disconnect, and oftentimes we get put in situations where I think we look like clowns, and we're doing it, and it's not a real benefit to us as black people. You're doing it, and it might have a good purpose in the long run, but it's not gonna help us. It's not gonna help us. That's why I didn't like Kanye going up there with Trump. You look like a prop. Like, even if you say something positive, what does this really mean? You think he's gonna be coming to you for policy change? No, we all know that. You know what I mean? Think he's gonna be calling you, Kanye, like, I really want to do something to help the economy for black people specifically. It's not gonna be anything like that.
Compare him to what is it called, a house slave?
Yeah, like, and that's where the terminology. But even with house slaves, and that's where a lot of our division comes from. The lighter ones, oftentimes, were in the house, while your darker skinned ones were in the field. So that brings division. And this is not just here. Even with the Hutus and Tutsis in Rwanda, that was a lot of the issues that stemmed between those two groups of people stemmed from when colonization happened and white people came over there. The light skin, I can't remember which one where I want to say the Hutus were the light skin, the Tutsis were the darker skin, but they were treated better. They were taught in schools oftentimes. They were given different types of jobs, and because of that, it's a natural division. And even with black people, we have a lot of this light skin, dark skin junk going, and that's because of the natural division just throughout time. Through colonization stuff. But yeah, I don't disagree with Kanye all the time. I think we need better representatives, and not just with him. It's a lot of, and that's why people have to step up and do things. But even with Al Sharpton, it's like, why are we only popping out when there's a tragedy? You know what I mean? It's just like, this is stuff you only see with black people so commonly, like. And I think we got to do something different. I think people are, though, and that's the positive part about it. And not just for black people, white people, everything. I think society is moving more towards an acceptance society, which I think at the same time there has to be boundaries. I think that's where the issue is going to occur in the future. It's like, how far will you go with a lot of this stuff? But I think that it's a positive what's happening.
So when it comes to like white culture overall, like respective to black culture, what do you think the biggest issue is? Like, what's like the biggest problem you see with white people that they don't get, they don't grasp? Maybe it's something hypocritical, maybe it's just something ignorant, but like, what is it like overall that you keep seeing again and again with white culture that you wish you could just like grab someone's head and just like shake it and change it?
That we're not much different from white people in a lot of ways. We want a lot of the same things. I think, oftentimes, like, people, I think you don't think we have ambitions. We don't want to do the right things. We don't want to do these things. So I think white people, oftentimes, they don't realize that black people, we're no different in that way. People want to be educated. People want to do the right things. People want to have families, things of that sort. It's just situations don't allow for the same opportunities and the same outcomes. It's just simple as that. And I think that just the understanding of how we operate, I think there's just, it's always going to be some sort of differences and disconnect between it, just because, like I said, people don't come from the same places. But I think that's probably the biggest one, is that black people, we're trying to figure our way through life the same way as anyone else is. I just think oftentimes we handle or have to deal with obstacles that a lot of people may not. And some of that's caused by us simply, but we just have to have an empathy and understanding. Because I look at it like this, a lot of times I hear people say, we're all Americans, which is true, right? So we're all Americans. Wouldn't you want everybody to do well? everybody to be in a same type of opportunity situation. Because they'll say it's the land of the free, but we aren't all granted the same opportunities, the same resources. So I think that's what's funny to me is like, if we're all Americans, then shouldn't we be trying our hardest to help these inner cities the same way you would try and help another city if they were going through, like even with Flint with the water situation? You would never see a wealthier city or a more predominantly white city, because Flint's predominantly black, be in that situation for how long they've been in, and there be nothing done about it. Yeah. But this is what's so common in these areas, and I think that we just have to have an understanding. If we all really here together and we all Americans, we all trying to do the right thing, then the fact of the matter is there should be a focus on the inner cities doing the right things to help these people, help kids, because predominantly they're black. In all honesty, a lot of these poor inner city areas are black, and they do have crime issues, but a lot of that's because of the lack of resources, lack of after school things, all these types of things they add to it, you know. And so that's I just think that's my point on a lot of that. If we're all Americans, we're all people, we all love each other like we say we do, then we got to do the right thing by each other. And that stems to black people too. Black people have to, I've always said this, we got to do better, because at the end of the day, if anything you won't do for yourself, you can't expect someone else to do it for you. That's a stupid way of thinking. Yeah. If you ain't gonna get up and clean your own house, you can't possibly expect someone else to go do it. So I think a lot of it's with us. We just gotta teach better, develop our culture. But I'll say this, as a young black father, I think I've seen a lot of more young black fathers. Some of my friends have become fathers, and I think that's a big part of it. I think a lot of us are staying in our child's lives. We're doing what we should be doing if you birth a child, and I think that's a big step, because the fathers are missing in the black community, and that's something I'll say. I don't know the statistics on it, but I'll tell you what, me having a father was a rarity. You know, from people I can tell, even my girlfriend didn't know her father. He's around, but didn't really know him. A lot of people I know just didn't know their father or don't have any sort of relationship with it. And I think that's necessary for balance, whether you're a woman or a man, because they're the first people you're going to have interactions with. The first woman you're going to know is your mother. First man you're probably going to know is your father, if they're both there. So I think that's important. It gives a balance. It gives an understanding of both sides of the spectrum. And I think it's helpful in the long run. And for black people, especially with young black males, with the issues we're experiencing, a lot of that would be solved if we got black males there to guide them from the jump. But I just think America, if America is what it is, then we got to do better, because it just seems fake. It seems fake when Chicago every year is having these issues with gun issues. Yeah. It seems fake when, you know, the disparity is so large in a lot of these, like with incarceration, with arrests, with things of this sort, with resources, with people like that. But, you know, that it's on the up and up, but I think that's important. If we're all Americans, we got to do what's right by all Americans. You know what I mean? Beverly Hills don't need the same help as Chicago do. So then we need to offer more resources to Chicago. We need to do what's necessary for them. And not just to pinpoint Chicago. I know Chicago's not all bad, but just in general, you know, we got to help and love everybody.
So Richard Hill gets nominated to be the head of the police force, all America. He can make any decisions he wants, and he's also the president of the United States. What are the first actions that you make change?
Y'all better be scared for one. I'm gonna keep it a buck, because it's gonna be a lot of stuff. But if we talking with the police for one, I would put in more programs, because I'm gonna be honest, I see a lot of police doing absolutely nothing. You waiting on the call, or you waiting to jack somebody up. You know what I mean? Like let's actually do serving and protecting. Let's try and help our communities. And as president, I would definitely have some after school things, like federally mandated. There has to be some sort of after school care, whether we got to put money towards it, because a lot of families, they just don't. And that's why I be saying with black families, if you look at a black family, and a lot of people, they don't have a father, and their mother is the main provider and the only provider, what do you think she's doing most of the time? Working. She's working. So what are the kids gonna do when they get out of school? If they don't have fun company or have somewhere to go, an actual program, then they're on the streets essentially. They're either gonna go home, and even if they go home, if the mother's not there, if no one's there necessarily to watch them, if they're at an age where they can be by themselves, well, what do you think is gonna happen? They're gonna get into stuff. They're gonna hang with people that maybe they're not supposed to, do things they wouldn't do because you're not around, and that, like I said, that stems to the fathers. That stems to other people being at home.
But just because I know you, why didn't that happen to you? Is it because you had family, or did it happen to you and maybe I just didn't know about it? But why were you protected from that? Was it the fact that you had two parents? Were you just at a young age like conscious about what's going on? Did you see other friends go down the wrong paths?
Right, and so I think a part of the positive for me, like I said, I think I just had it a little better than a lot of people that I knew because, like I said, I just had a father, and so I put it more so to the fact of morals and principles. And my parents were strictly Christian. Not that I'm like a strict Christian or anything of that sort, but my parents were apostolic Pentecostal Christians, both of them. We went to church every Sunday when I was a kid. And not that like religion's the way or anything like that, but what I do believe with religion, with anything that's like of that sort, is when you have rules and convictions and regulations, some things were taught to me is just wrong. They just are. Like my parents taught me that. So whether I do them or not, and I've done things that aren't right in my life, but I've always had the conviction from what I know my parents would not want me to do and what they would expect of me. And because of that, I think that helped me a lot. And I think that's what comes from a stable home. I had a relatively stable home. I wasn't moving everywhere. My parents were always generally around. Now, I had a weird upbringing a little bit because of where I lived, and because I had a brother that had spinal muscular atrophy when I was a kid. And because of that, he needed 24/7 care. So my mother, that was basically her primary job, was taking care of him. So my father basically worked a lot. So when I was younger, I usually had to go. They put me in it's this thing called backfield in motion when I was about in 4th, 5th grade. And essentially, I had a good coach, fortunately, and he was willing to pick me up, feed me type thing. But after school, I was with a lot of these guys that were from either rougher areas or just in rougher situations, that didn't have fathers, or just in more poverty-stricken situations. And they don't have the same guidance. It's just, I was expected to do well in school from a young age, from my parents. There was no excuse for you not making it because you're smart. We expect you to do the right thing, get good grades. But those kids, they didn't have those expectations. A lot of them didn't even show their parents their report card. So when you're growing up in that way with no boundaries, no expectations, no conviction, no rules or regulations, you're apt to do anything. And that's why now that I'm grown, it's crazy how many people have been killed and been locked up that I've just known from growing up. I mean, I can name probably 10 that are dead or in jail, same age as me, 22, 23. And it's sad, but it's just, that's what happens when you don't have a conviction. So I think that's necessary, you know what I'm saying? I think in our community, and in any community, but I think that we got to have stability. We got to have regulations on stuff, even to the streets, and not to delve too deep into something else, but even with the streets, there's certain codes that even street people used to go by. You don't hurt women and children.
Yeah.
Now, what does that make sense if you're committing all these other crimes? It's almost backwards. Like, just the women and children, and you might kill a man, but it's just the principle behind it. It's the principle behind it. You don't hurt a child that's innocent. You don't hurt a woman that you can overpower and because you can, or something like that. We protect those women and children protected. So that you gotta live off certain type of principles because it keeps you from certain things. Just like the mob, like that's why you didn't snitch. Because if you don't snitch, this is the issue with a lot of issue with the streets. That's why people were telling, and you got these issues because it's no more principle even within the streets. Like the minor principles that the streets even had, you don't tell. Why you don't tell? Because it takes down other people. You're taking down people that you came into an agreement with to commit these acts, and now you're gonna take them down because you got caught. See, the mob and stuff, what we would do is, as the mob or the mafia, we'll take care of your family. That was your incentive to not snitch. Because if you snitch, we're gonna go kill your family. Yeah. See this, and that it may seem dark, but it's that literal. When you stand on certain principles, it's just certain things you don't do. And that's why I be saying there's no stability in a lot of these hoods, a lot of these neighborhoods, a lot of these young black people, and not just them. I mean, even with to young white people, I think there's a lot of the stuff we're seeing now. There's just there's a lack of stability in some of these homes, and it's becoming more common. And that's why we're having these issues.
All right, so this is me playing a little bit of devil's advocate here / my whiteness / some of this rum. Yeah. So a big problem I see with these videos of black people being shot, really of people being shot in general, but especially of black people being shot, is a lot of times they don't follow instructions. And I don't know if you saw this one. I'm sure you did, but it was actually right near MLK, the high school we went to. This dude it was like a car chase or something, and he pulled over and he got out of the car and started running from the cop. The cop shot him in the back. And I thought a lot about this one because I'm like, damn, did he realize to shoot him in the back? And I presented this one to a lot of different people. I'm like, because you don't know the situation. And I've talked to cops about this. I've talked to other people about this, and some people are like, no, like that's a dick move. Why would you shoot a guy in the back? But on the flip side, what if he didn't shoot him in the back and then he went and killed like a family? It's a criminal on the run. Like the criminal is literally running away from you. So as a cop, you have a responsibility. That's one scenario. But a lot of scenarios I see is like, I see someone writing like these super long paragraphs about whatever happened, and then I watch the video. And yes, like it seems screwed up to me, but a lot of times, like the person takes off their seatbelt, opens the door, and runs away. It's like, I don't know, like I don't know how you feel about Black Lives Matter. I used to be a huge Black Lives Matter fan, but then I really started thinking about the Mike Brown thing. I kind of changed my mind because I really started looking into the story, and evidence shows that he actually fought back. And it seems. There's actually cases where this doesn't happen, and for whatever reason they don't get as publicized, which they don't get as much attention, which really, like there's this one kid in the hood who had like a Nerf gun or something, and the cops literally rolled up. This kid's like 12 or 13 years old and shot him. Okay, so you know about him. It was like under like a little pavilion thing. Yeah. That one did not get as much attention, did it?
No, it didn't. Not. I mean, it got a little buzz, but it didn't get heavy attention. I remember it.
Yeah, so that one I was like, that should be the one. That should be the one that Black Lives Matter like builds their foundation on. But part of me thinks the reason why Mike Brown was able to take Black Lives Matter off, and here we go again in like the whole Kanye thing, like is it right to be a provocateur just to get attention and create conversation, is because it was actually a very debatable case. It was actually a case where people could like say, is this right or wrong? He robbed a gas station for like chips or something stupid like 3 days before, like, or not robbed, but like stole. So in regards to most of the videos I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I see most of the time these people are actually like, not following the law, and then they're also not following the officers' instructions. What's your take on that? Is it's still fucked up on the cops' part, or should more blame be put towards like the victim? Like what's going on here, and are these actually like justified like scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about that, and I get exactly what you're saying, because that's always my fear when I watch these videos. I'm always like, man, like what were they doing? Because I know how it's gonna look.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of the disconnect. That's what I mean. Like with cops, and a lot of times how they address people of color and how they conduct themselves is in a way of, I'm superior, you listen to whatever I say, and if you don't, I do whatever I want to you. I'm gonna lock you up, I'm gonna put you up. Because as people in general, you have rights. I mean, you have general rights. I mean, if a cop was to come approach me on the street and I was just, let's say, walking down the street and ask for my identification, me personally, I'd probably deny him. Yeah. I mean, but see, I'm not following his command. So, now if I end up getting shot, a lot of people might say, well, if you just gave me your ID from the jump, it wouldn't have been an issue. Yeah. But so it's a part of what's necessary and how it's being brought about. So like even with the Mike Brown situation, I'm pretty familiar with it and the Trayvon Martin, because Trayvon Martin was before Mike Brown, and I remember when that one happened. That one affected me a lot. because I was about 15, 16. I remember watching the trial when they acquitted not the officer, but George Zimmerman, because he wasn't even an officer. And it fucked with me. It really fucked with me, because to me it was like, damn, I could be walking home, someone could be following me thinking I'm doing something, approach me with the gun, I get in an altercation with him, he kills me, and he walks clean. And so with Mike Brown, for instance, even that situation, oftentimes everything is not brought into evidence. Mike Brown didn't do necessarily all the right things, and that's why it's always been an iffy one with him. He did rob the store, he did somewhat assault the worker there, but what a lot of people don't know is there was a video released later on where apparently he was in some sort of deal with them, the people that worked there. What they presume it was weed, to be honest. But essentially, so what had occurred was a few nights before he had come back, or maybe the night before even, he had left his backpack with him. It looked like essentially what ended up happening was he gave them something, and they gave him a box of Rellos. Like it was an exchange. Like he didn't give them money, but he gave them kind of like this bag, and then it's like, y'all give us a box of Rellos. So it looked like it's some sort of exchange. So he comes back, and the premise was that he was asking for his bag back that he had left with them for whatever reason, and they weren't trying to give it to him. He got angry, did all that. So he's not necessarily in the right, but there's a lot of things that go into this. So then when he's walking down the street and the cop pulls up on him and is asking him to get out the street, then that's when the altercation supposedly occurred. But my premise is this: where there has to be reasonableness. Like everyone shouldn't die for certain things. You get what I'm saying? Like if it's a traffic stop, or like even with the Eric Garner, that's another big one with me, where he was basically like choked out. This is big guy, and he kind of resisted arrest. He was mad when he first grabbed him, but
the guy in New York,
yeah,
his cigarettes or something?
Exactly. He was selling loose cigarettes or something like that, and they pulled up on him. But in these situations, it's like, did someone have to die though? You get what I'm saying? Yeah. It's 8 police out here.
That's the big argument. Even like the MLK situation near our high school.
Right. And
some guy got shot in the back because I think he stole a vehicle, and he got out and started running, and then the cop just shot him in the back.
Right. Exactly. And so in that situation, he's running. So you do have an obligation to try and stop him, but a lot of people don't know that actually police, when it comes to like chasing it en route, for one thing, they're not supposed to shoot you in the back. It's not policy. They have certain policy things, just like with the Eric Garner situation. The chokehold was disbanded in the 90s. They as the policy, you're not supposed to put someone in chokehold for those reasons. Because you're struggling with somebody, you throw them in a chokehold, you could choke them out. Yeah. You might not even realize it, but you're trying to fight them and you're choking them out. So this is the reason why these policies aren't in case. And like in that case, he had a weapon on him even. He was running with the weapon supposedly, and he shot him in the back. But I look at these situations, but my point is like that it's like if I fuck up on my job, if I do certain things, I'm gonna get fired. You know what I'm saying? If some money come missing, I'm gonna get fired. Now you're telling me you can't get fired for a life? That's not worth the firing? Yeah. Or something happening. So a lot of these situations, although I concur, and I think for a lot of white people even, and even just people in general, but white people, a lot of times this is what they see. They see an argument, they see some sort of altercation, then they end up getting shot, and they're like, well, if they just follow the directions from the jump, none of this happens. But people are obligated to do what you want them to do, even as a police officer, if it's not a legal reason. You know what I'm saying? Like with the Sandra Bland, and she ended up hanging herself supposedly in the jail after being arrested on the traffic stop. You pulled her over for a blinker. You basically tell her to put out her cigarette. That's what starts the altercation in the car. She says, no, I don't have to put out my cigarette, which she absolutely doesn't. Now, it may be rude, but you're the professional in this situation. You're writing the ticket. So it's however you deal with it from that situation is on you. That's how I look at it. She doesn't have to put out a cigarette. There's no legal reason for her to put out a cigarette. You might want it because you might want to talk to her. You might not want to smell it. You don't think she should be doing that right now. But at the end of the day, she doesn't have to. So I think we got to look at it like a lot of these situations, no one had to die. Eric Garner, no one had to die. Tamir Rice, like you said, when they pulled up on him, that was just a terrible, terrible situation. 12-year-old with a Nerf gun, you walk up and shoot him. Like, why is there not better training for these situations? It shouldn't be walk up and shoot people, or walk up and put them in chokeholds. And even so, if that's the case, even your situation, Laquan McDonald was I know a lot of these by name because I just remember a lot of these happening, and a lot of these have effect. And I hate seeing the videos because I think it's like PTSD too for a lot of black people. It's not good watching people on video get killed and get shot and stuff like that. But Even with Laquan McDonald, the officer, it's 16 officers out here. This officer pulls up and shoots him 16 times. Like and he has a knife in his hand. And you tell me 16 grown men with guns and tasers and batons and stuff, y'all can't take down a teenager with a knife that's clearly bugging, like clearly he's on something or something's going wrong. So that's why I be saying it's like these situations have to be taken seriously because no one had to die in this situation. There wasn't a threat for your life. There wasn't a situation where they pulled a weapon on you or anything of that sort. You're just shooting because you feel like you have the right to do so because they're not doing what you or you're scared or whatever the case may have been. But I think that's why they have to be taken seriously. But the police thing will, I think, correct itself because, like I said, it's online every day. So people, I think, are really advocating. They're emailing people. I've seen people put like the police department's number and email. Like I know people are blowing them up about some of this shit. So there are going to be policies put in place, but I think it has to be taken seriously because we just see it too often when black people like I said, I mean, since Trayvon Martin, I mean, I've seen dozens of videos of black people getting killed. I mean, running away with no weapon on them, things like that. And it's just Philando Castile, that was another one where he had gotten pulled over. He was the passenger. He tells them he has a weapon, has a permit for a gun. Guy ends up shooting him. And it's just stuff like that. It's like there has to be something done because it's not right. It's not right for him just to be a dead man, and this guy keeps his job. They just fired the guy who choked out Eric Gardner literally, I think, 2 days ago. 5 years later. 5 years. It took 5 years of people yelling at him, protesting, all of this to simply get the guy fired. No charges will be brought on him, but just simply get him fired for putting him in an illegal chokehold. And that's what I'm saying. It's just, it seems excessive that this is that needed when lives are being taken. It just, if you do your job bad, you should lose your job at least. That's how I look at it. It's like, you know what I mean? If you kill somebody and you didn't have to kill them or they were unarmed, you should lose your job at least. I mean, we're not even talking about indictments or actual charges being brought upon people.
It's good stuff. So this is a question I have, and I have my own opinions on this. But when it comes to the N word, I'm not even going to say it out of respect right now. But what's your opinion on other races saying it? And this is my opinion on it. I think when we get to a period in history where you can go out, a white person can go out in the street and just scream it, I actually think that's when you know racism's done. I think that's when you know that it's over with. But obviously it doesn't happen now. Right. And for very good reasons. But I think it's interesting that the word is used so much like within the black community and within white people behind closed doors, like calling each other. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can't even sing some of my friends' music because it's just like I'm out at the concert and I'm like, I gotta censor myself. Yeah, I sound like a clean soundtrack on like the radio or something, singing because I just don't know, because other people have different opinions on it. But I guess like the very elementary question is like, do you think white people can say it? But I guess deeper than that is, what do you think it means that black people can say it amongst each other and that white people still can't say it? And I think that's a deeper question than a lot of people really consider. Because like I've seen white people talk about this, and I don't really like the answer that they give. I don't know what show it was on. It was on some show, like three white bitches were talking about this. But I didn't like the answer because it's just like, you just don't say it. You just don't say it. But it's like, no, it's deeper than that. It's like, this really means something. And it's like when you're dating someone, like the jokes you can say and you can't say. Right. The jokes you can't say, they still have like an emotional attachment to. It's really going to screw them up, so you don't say it. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. But I'm sure you've thought a lot about this.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is white people shouldn't say it. But I think it, and this is the reason. This is the reason why. It's a couple reasons why I feel like white people shouldn't say it. First reason is, as a black person, if I wouldn't want you calling me that, I think just off of general respect, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? And if you can't respect me enough, then to me that's like fighting words almost. It's like, you get what I'm saying? Like, exactly. I'm asking, I don't want you to call me that, but you're gonna keep trying to do it. Now we can fight, type thing. But on the flip side, it has a historical negative context that's been used by white people to oppress, to make black people feel less than, as an insult to black people. And because of that, I just don't think white people should use it. I don't think you should want to use it. It's like, that's why I be saying with white people, if you're truly not racist, and why would you necessarily even want to use the word? Now I get, like you said, black people, you use it all the time. I use it, you know what I mean? Especially when I'm referencing my other black people, I might call them niggas, nigga. And I get there's like this confusion. It's like, damn, you call everybody a nigga. Like, but with black people, I know they can never, like, for instance, if I let a white person call me nigga all the time and we were cool, it only takes that one time for him to get mad and really be like, you know what I mean? Now I'm gonna really use the word against you. You get what I'm saying? No black person can do that to me because we're black. So, we use it in a colloquial, like, general context all the time. And so I just think off those two reasons, because the historical context and just the fact that if black people don't want you calling them that, now I get it. I mean, I've seen black people, they be around white friends and they're fine with them, like, using it in kind of, and I mean, I guess to each their own.
It's a very strange thing though, because if you really think about the history behind it, it's like, it's so twisted and it's so sick, and you could argue it's just a word, but like, the way that word was used so many times, it's
and when you
it's really like
with everything, you get what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? It's not like there was just an insult. You know what I mean? It's like nigger was like used by slave owners, commonly with slaves, commonly in the deep South, Jim Crow era, to reference black people, to be demeaning towards them. So I just don't think as black people we should let white people slide. But the funny thing is, to me, and I've thought about this because I've heard like people say, well, what about Hispanics and what about other races and even Chinese? Because it almost seems like it's really only white people. Because I've seen other minorities use it, even in reference to themselves. And,
but they also weren't the oppressor. So it has a different
context. You're right. And I mean, even with Hispanics, to be honest, Hispanics are, a lot of them, if you really look at their history, they're Africans too. They came from slavery in a lot of ways. They just migrated into, Central America. But, you're right, exactly. I mean, they weren't the oppressors of it, so that's another thing with it. When it comes to music, I look at it like this: if you're at a concert and it's like, I get it. There's a rapper. I mean, what's that song by YG? My nigga. Like, this is a huge song. He's going to concerts, a bunch of white people. I can't expect them to all blank out the nigga. Now, that's not how ridiculous I am to it. I mean, you putting it in music, you're disseminated into society. So now at this point, people are picking up on it, they're going to use it and things like that. But I just think, at general respect, white people, you should never feel comfortable to me as a white person just saying nigga this, nigga that, and it's the black people that. I mean, if you do, to me, you wildin'. Like, I don't know where you thought this was cool at. But I get the confusion sometimes, but it's just, my point is, as a large whole, black people aren't going to feel comfortable with you calling them nigga. And off of general respect, you just shouldn't,
Yeah. And again, kind of playing devil's advocate here, I think it's a symptom of like the wound still being open, and you're like rubbing salt in the wound. Yeah. And that's why I say, like, when a society can actually say the N word, like,
not to cut you off, but that's another thing I was trying to say is that also I think it's, like I said, it stems from the original point that I kind of made when we first kind of opened up. We're talking about with black people and their freedom. For one thing, we didn't free ourselves, and secondly, there's a lack of remorse, I feel like, with white people for slavery, and the reasoning being is because none of you all at this point have subjected us to slavery. So it's like, I get it,
like, I
but
didn't do it.
Right.
Why do you feel
so?
Like
why am I getting the blunt of this? But it's just, I've always said this. Do you think black people are still affected by the results of slavery to this day? If the answer is yes, then I would. Vice versa.
And that's a problem. A lot of people will say yes, but there's also a lot of people that will say no. And that's why I say, like, people like Kid Cudi and Lil Wayne more directly. But let me reference Kid Cudi real quick. He said in one of his songs, he was like, I'm driving drunk or something like that. This is like a little bit, it seems like off topic. But when he said that, I was like, fuck. Why do you have to say that? Because he just killed so many kids.
Right.
Literally, he killed so many kids by saying that. And that's actually real. I bet if you did like a scientific study and you took one planet where Kid Cudi said that and one planet where he didn't, a lot more kids drove drunk. And there's also the argument that he was like documenting the truth. Maybe he was driving drunk, and maybe he should say that in a song because that's what actually happened. But at the same time, you have to assume some responsibility for what you say. Even like me and you, we don't have huge followings, but like people watch your stories, people watch my stories, and they affect them, and therefore they're going to affect their friends, and down the line, within a day, you can affect millions of people, and that's not bullshit. Yeah. So when it comes to Lil Wayne and him saying, "I've never experienced racism," I think that's a problem because there's a good amount of white people watching that are like, oh yeah, racism's not like it doesn't exist anymore. It's not a real thing. Like Lil Wayne's never experienced racism. He's a thug. He's never experienced and maybe that's his truth and that's okay. But I've definitely seen racism firsthand, and I feel it a lot. And being a white person and being able to go to like these white events, I don't know what to call them. Being able to go, like I still feel it. Like it's still very real. Like slavery wasn't that long ago. So I don't really know where I was going with this. What was the question we were just talking about? The N word, right? Yeah. So
about, the usage of it. And
it having like it's still like an open wound to people, and like I mean I really feel like people that say racism doesn't exist, they need to think about why it's not okay for white people to say the N-word right now.
And I would ask, when did it stop existing? So that's the funny thing. Yeah. I've heard that, but to me it's like, when did this... If it was so racist they had us as slaves, so racist after slavery they decided to make society in a way where it's segregated, they can still be subjected to all types of harm and discriminatory acts. I mean, when you look at it like this, I mean, when did it end? When did it all of a sudden, oh no was racist anymore. Yeah. No one is put this in society. Yeah. So I always find it funny when people say that because we know for sure it was racist at a point. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So when did it
there should be an answer for that, and there's not, and that's the problem. And just like literally like, okay, if I was at a bar and I had a black girlfriend, or let's start with this example. I was at a bar and I had a white girlfriend, and someone came up to me and said, like, if you came up, not you, but like someone that looked like you, and said, "Yo, get your cracker girl out of here," I would laugh. I would literally be like, "Dude, bro, like, you're funny, bro." You're like, I would just, I'm like, that's just hilarious. But if I was with a black girl, so if I had a black girlfriend, and this is my third time saying this, but we had 2 phone calls in between, so Richard's like, "What the hell's going on?" If I had a black girlfriend and I was in a bar, and someone called her the N-word, I would immediately punch them in the face. The same wouldn't be true with a white girl, and I think just because the fact that it has that effect still, and like I said, I can't say if I was black I would do the same because I'm not, and I don't know what my opinions would be if I was a black male, but I just know that it still has that effect, and because of that, my question is to people that say there's no longer racism today. It's like, how can you say that when like the N-word still has that much weight? So that's just proof to me that there's still something out there, and I keep circling back to this, but it's like I really want to know like what's like the most effective action plan for all of us to take, white people, black people, and I think I know the answer is like to like deconstruct. It's like to really like destroy the idea that black people are criminals. I think that's really what it stems to, or maybe not criminals, but just dangerous. Because black people think that even. I've been with black friends who are, like, if the black person was white, the stuff they just said to me would be considered very racist because they're like, oh, you don't want to go down there, there's tons of black people. Or, watch out for this guy with the hoodie walking, he's black,
right. And that's the funny thing is because we have a realization of ourselves too, But, that's why I be saying it's how we grow up, it's a contentiousness within a black society. Like, there's almost this hardened exterior you have to build up a lot of times, especially if you come from the hood, because there's just these obstacles you may have to encounter. You can't be weak
you're weak, you're a weak link. You're an easy target for certain types of people, and yeah, I mean, and I think the N word, and that's why I feel a lot of times I think it's kind of silly sometimes that we let it affect us to this day. But like I said, I think that comes from the historical context.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes from the historical context mixed with it actually, like, there's still something wrong.
Yeah, and then exactly,
Yeah.
and then there's still racism. So in society, but and I think, like I said, this comes from the lack of understanding and remorse with slavery. There was no justice for slavery. You know what I'm saying? A whole group of people were enslaved. They were raped, killed, split up. Culture was stripped from them. And there was no actual reality justice done for those actions to the people who did it, to the people who helped it continue, to none of the people who brought the people over. There was no legal justice done for it. So it is an open wound. I think that's always going to be part of America's issue because of that. Because if you look at it, like, even for instance with the Holocaust in Germany, you know, you can't fly a Nazi flag in Germany. It's illegal. You'll go to jail if you fly a Nazi flag. You go in the South, I could probably ride around in traffic long enough right now and find a couple cars with Confederate flags on, or with a sticker on it as Confederate flag. And so there's this wound that's just constantly open. I mean, there are Confederate statues in the South.
Yeah.
You know, within the Capitol. You know,
it's not racist though. It's just cultural.
Exactly. And then it's like that's our culture. Well, you know, and that's the issue. You know, there's just this lack of understanding and remorse for what slavery was, how it affected people, and even to this day, the effects it still has. I mean, like, there are studies that say the generational gap will never be closed because it couldn't possibly be closed when you have a 200-year generational wealth building off of free labor at that. So that's what I'm saying. This stems from racism and capitalism because it was this greed. It was the understanding, shoot, we can make people work for free and build our whole economy off of it. Slavery by far was the most profitable industry before the turn of the Industrial Revolution, before it was delegalized and the Industrial Revolution starts to occur and whatnot. So it was by far the most profitable. So, you know, you got to basically begin your entire society off of this. There's no justice for what occurred. And so it's always going to be some sort of an open wound with black people. And that's why I think, I mean, it comes from the top down. There has to be an understanding. That's why, personally, I've never been against reparations. Now, I know a lot of people hate that term. I know a lot of white people think it's the most absurd thing. But I think it's more absurd that other groups have received reparations and black people absolutely didn't. I think it's more absurd that we would actually legally promise 40 acres and a mule, and 99% of those black people never received that after slavery. So it's just, what do you think is going to happen 200 years from now? People ain't forgotten. People ain't let that go. People ain't feeling like they've done fairly. So I think America always constantly has that open room. I think that's why the N-word is so prominent still to this day, and there's this confusion about it because we use it. It's like, how come I'm white, I can't use it? I just think it's because that wound has never been healed. It's never been, and it really won't be because there's no justice for slavery. I think that it'll never be truly healed because there's just no proper justice. There were plenty of German generals that were arrested. There are generals that, if they still caught them, if they're still alive from World War II, they'll still arrest them and still indict them. So you get what I'm saying? It's like, at least you're getting justice. At least you're getting this understanding that this was wrong. No one even almost admits that slavery was wrong. No one went to jail for slavery. No one, you know what I mean, experienced any of these things. So, and that's the open wound. But America's, notorious for it. You know what I mean? When the economy crashed, no one got in trouble for that. None of these bankers went to jail. None of these bankers were screwed. We just had to pay them out. What do you think is going to happen again? The economy's going to crash again eventually because the same process is being done. There's no repercussions for something that went wrong, that shouldn't have went wrong, going wrong because there's just not any actual judgment or justice towards it. And so that's why I think that's the biggest issue with America to this point. And I think that's the only reason we're still having these conversations to this day. And it's because that wound has never been closed and never really will, because there's no justice for slavery that's going to actually happen. There's no real, not even on the justice scale of today's time, is no evenness to even that out.
Yeah.
And I think people realize that that's the issue.
Yeah. Unless white people become slaves.
Hey, no, you know what I'm saying? But see, that's what I be saying though. You know, it's like, even if not that, it's like reparations. What that means is we know we were wrong, and we're gonna do something to try and help you all get to some sort of an even standpoint.
Yeah.
Now it's so absurd because it's so long down the line. I don't think we'll ever get them, and not necessarily. I think it would be hard to even do it in today's time. But that's my point. It's just it was never handled correctly. After they were freed, society didn't say, okay, here's this stuff to make up for that time that your families were enslaved. Here's this so you can start your own industry and be caught up in society. It was none of that. They were basically homeless. A lot of slaves, people don't know, actually ended up working back for their slave masters. What do you do when you're freed a slave in a society that they can still kill you in? They can do all these things that you're not welcome anywhere. What are you gonna do? You're gonna go back to the same place that you only know, and that's why I say this. Just there was never any actual thing done for slavery, for the descendants of the slaves, for the slaves that were freed, and that's why that wound will always be open.
Richard Hill, it was a pleasure. Oh, that's perfect timing.
That's perfect timing, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Anytime,
Yeah.
man.
If you guys like that content, let me know. Comment below.
Yeah. Follow me at Cardo the Goat. Cardo the Goat on Instagram.
Here.
You know what I'm saying? Cardo the Goat on Instagram. My
I'll
Twitter.
link his stuff below.
Yeah, you try, I do. I mean, DM me, do whatever, man. I don't have any issue having conversations about.
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy, and he posts really cool, sometimes provocative.
I be jerked on Instagram. Don't be offended. Hey, you see they took it down. That's crazy.
Did they take? I don't know.
They took it down
what
for
exactly
bullying.
did they take down? Oh,
The guy. I guess we were talking about him. Like in
yeah.
that one video, they like took it down.
Okay,
for
well,
bullying.
I saw what they took down then. Yeah,
That's
what really got my attention to get you on here though. But,
yeah, that was a funny night, man. By the way, he was messing with us. I might repost a video of somebody following me, but he was messing with us. We would mind our business, me and my friend, and he started like harassing us. But he was kind of a funny guy. That's why we were joking with him.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything malicious, but he was acting he was very belligerent and like drunk. But anyways, follow me, Carter the Goat. You try, I do on Twitter.
All right, guys, peace out. Like, comment, subscribe, dislike, do what you got to do. I'm out.
For sure.